It's Maddie, aka Sean Puffy Loans, back up in this piece with a silent E, dropping knowledge on all you non-believers with mortgage A to Z. In this week, it's letter E for employment. Alright, a while back, I made a video on some of the reasons why peeps are getting declined, and the main reasons: income or employment. Lenders, they're like house cats. You gotta spoon feed. It's gotta be the right time and at the right time, or else you could end up being denied. Sometimes you have a real problem, but in my experience, it's a matter of what institution you're working with and then the mortgage profession. Take a look at this list from truthaboutmortgages.com, looking at the top 30 reasons and how many of them are income or employment related. Yes, they go hand in hand, and if you're working with the wrong lender or your loan officer sleeping on the job, your deal could get whacked. So let's break it down. You dig? I should have been easy on this one. Today, we're talking about the four food groups of employment. Those employed by others, those that are self-employed, those that are retired, and those that are investors. Let's discuss the summary of each and maybe some potential pitfalls. First group, those that are employed by others. This is the most common group, and you're likely a W-2 wage earner. You may be paid on a salary or hourly, and your income typically increases over time, at least once a year with inflation. Now, if you're in this category, great. The loan systems, as far as the application and verification of your employment, is rather cut and dry. Ultimately, the system is built for this. If you live in a W-2 and pay stub type of world, your life is rather easy. However, there can be some pitfalls too. For example, if you work for the family business, say you recently graduated college and then went to go work for the family farm and now paid a W-2 as a farmer. Some lenders may want to see your income tax filing for at least 1 year to accept that type of income. If you meet the test, great. And if not, you may need to find another lender that might be okay with this setup. Typically, lenders like to see income that clearly follows a 2-year history. This doesn't necessarily mean you have to be at the job for 2 years, but let's think about it. If you went to Villanova University for an engineering degree and then after graduation accepted a position at Honeywell as an engineer, you're fine. The lender can feed off your diploma and your education to create that 2 years of history and expertise. However, if you're coming from an engineering field with an engineering degree and 10 years of experience and want to become a salesperson or let's just say loan officer, then your lender may want to see some more time with your employment. In most circumstances, there aren't any issues, but keep in mind the 24-month requirement. Next, my favorite people, the lovely self-employeds. Why do I like working with self-employeds? It's because they usually have interesting stories and likewise their businesses. Like the wage earner, the lender likes to see 2 years of employment as a business owner. There may be certain circumstances where the 1 year mark may work, but that will depend on the lender and the type of business and the overall history. Your story and history is just as important as the documentation. And if your lender isn't playing ball, I've got a guy for you. It's great being self-employed until that mortgage request. The documentation required for your loan, it's never ending. The calculation of your income depends on the lender and the underwriter's interpretation of those numbers. You can speak with Wells Fargo and then get the heave-ho, not only to work for a credit union and then says, come on board. It's a matter of trust between the biz owner and the loan officer, and sometimes that takes years to develop that type of rapport. Many times the business owner will issue themselves a W-2, but only pay out the salary one time a year, likely at the beginning or end of the year. Any salary could be a negotiable number, but the lender will want an explanation of why there isn't pay stubs but a W-2, or how and why it's paid, if there aren't any actual pay stubs to pony up. Then, there are the profit and loss statements that will provide the lender with a representation of the current income since the last tax return. Most self-employeds file an extension, so the profit and loss request may have to cover the year prior and the year-to-date period on 2 separate forms. The moral of the story is that when you're self-employed, expect your list of requirements to increase on the front end of the application, since you'll be required to submit tax returns, business returns, but also during the underwrite, there may be a litany of documentation that needs to be explained for that qualifying income to be approved. In my opinion, smaller banks usually do a better job at this. It's a stressful process because to get your loan fully approved, it may require input from third parties like your bookkeeper and your accountant. The next contestant on Who Wants to Become a Loanionaire are the retirees. Usually this income is represented via pension, Social Security, or retirement distributions. And like self-employed, most of this income could be gathered from the tax returns. However, if you're recently retired or changing the amount of your RMDs, your required minimum distributions, you may need help from your financial advisor. Pensions may not always be cut dry. The lender may want to confirm the tenure of the receipt of this income for the next 3 years. So even if it's a form of income you've been receiving for the 10 years prior, the lender may want some documentation stating that the organization supplying the pension is good through a certain period. Last, Social Security income is usually verified via the current awards letter and the 2 most recent bank statements that show current receipt. SSA receivers can have some of all of it grossed up depending on what's taxable, since it's sometimes a standalone income and can be untaxed. Last group, the investor. This could be the hardest nut to crack due to the irregularity of the income sources and the timing of the income. Last year I did a loan for a guy that was an owner of several companies that developed real estate. These companies bought land, developed it, and sold the product, and then they did it all over again. And he didn't do one project at a time, but several projects. And some of these projects he had a minority interest in, some of them he had a limited interest, some of them he had a majority. And he had trouble finding a suitor for the loan because the people he was working with couldn't baseline his income or determine, based on his balance sheet, how to classify the income. Was it capital gains? Was it the owner distributions? But once Steve and I got together, we hashed it all out. And every time he makes his mortgage payment, he thanks me. But that's not what you need to expect when it comes to an investor. The most recent tax return for these types, it might look amazing, but then again, the one prior may not look anything alike. And when it comes to capital gains, lenders like to see a few things, at least a clean 3-year history of the reoccurrence of this form of income, and then the inventory to back up the earnings. Another example, let's just say you flip homes or stocks or cars for that matter, and you have the history, great. But that may only be one part of it. Your approval may hinge on the documentation of the inventory of your cars, your homes, or whatever it has to do with your income. So if you're selling some of your inventory for the down payment, the lender may want to have into consideration what type of inventory you have left over. So there's huge potential with investors, and sometimes there are some other ways to look at it that aren't income-based. Another such way could be the depletion or the dissipation of their assets. Say if the capital isn't tied up in private companies, but in cash, stocks, bonds, publicly traded assets, then this could be another potential way to score the income that could be based or created on an income stream that may match the amortization of the loan. Another way could be a custom calculation based on the 7 or 10 or 15 year. Here the lender is able to decide what they will use and how they will calculate it, and of course if it's acceptable. Some lenders just may not accept it at all because they may only want one or the other, passive income or active income, but not a combination of both. Well, that's all I got from right now from Bad Boy Borrow by Bill. Hopefully you've enjoyed this session and you can identify with one of those 4 groups. And hopefully this is information that you can utilize on your next loan journey. If there is anything I can do to help you out as far as further information, please leave a comment or connect with me here online. Love to hear from you. Have a great week.